creating unexpected proximities while simultaneously erasing traditional qualities of closeness through their machine-driven logics. Please join me in welcoming Silvio to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a big pleasure to be here. It's been like, I'm very grateful. I have been enjoying the last 2 days with amazing presentations, performances, and artwork. So I'm glad to do this lecture, and I would need my slides for that. Yeah. So in the meantime, I'm gonna just wait for the, yeah. Oh, wow, spoiler. Yeah. Okay, so this is the title, the actual title. Too much screen. Sorry, another little thing. I don't have the slides in the screen over here, so I cannot see them. So otherwise, I have to be all the time like this. Can you turn it on there? Otherwise, in the meantime, I can tell you what you already know, which that guy is Tom from MySpace. Sorry. Well, I can start like this. It's going to be a bit rude, but yeah, there is no other way apparently. So I'm going to start by saying, start with a little story that has to do with an invite that I got for a remote conversation in Italy, like an invitation to take part in a round table. And the theme was new media. Of course, new media is a bit broad, a bit generic. So I thought, okay, what to talk about specifically? And then, the image came to mind. You know, I imagined myself in this kind of screen robot, a bit like Edward Snowden, with people taking selfie of me. And that gave me the inspiration for the actual topic, which was remote work, which strangely, I mean, many as Italians know, it's called smart working there. I don't know why, but that's the case. And to sell it to the organizers, I said, okay, I'm gonna reflect on the telepresence by embodying it. Yeah, and it's like this kind of reflection already began a bit in advance because, with the organizer organizing the talk, they were like, what shall we have a call? Shall we have a call for empathy? It's like I'm the sort of worst kind of millennial, or the best kind, depending on how you see things. So I'm allergic to the telephone, but this allergy is really broad to a certain extent and involves any kind of call. Of course, I mean, as also the curators of Transmediale really know. So to what do I owe this rejection? Well, of course, the pandemic had a big impact on this. So I would like to give you a bit of a picture of what my life looked like during the pandemic. And I'm going to do it by showing this painting by Carl Spitzweg called The Poor Poet. I was living in the Netherlands, in which this kind of setup, because of this kind of small houses, very high and very narrow, was really my daily environment. But instead of let's say burning my poems to keep myself warm, I was giving lectures, teaching on Zoom. And of course, I mean, it's it seems like that. Yeah, I don't know how to put it. It seems like that they used a style transfer, the AI tool, to sort of make this fake of this deep fake of Tom of MySpace. I felt like I wanted to justify this animosity towards Zoom with a bit of a theory. And let's say the elements, the concepts that I want to root this animosity, this theory, is the relationship between digital maximalism and minimal housing, like Existenzminimum in a certain way. So let's start from the first concept. Like many artists, theorists, critics, I also contributed to to a wave of analysis of Zoom fatigue, which, as you might remember at the time, became almost a Zoom theory fatigue, in the sense that we were reading a lot of articles on the Zoom fatigue. So what was my deep contribution to this? Was a little provocation, targeted at cultural workers. So the provocation was to demand like dial-up internet, like the slow internet of the 2000, like the one with the beep, 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 you remember, with the modem. Well, I couldn't think of any cons of this, except for one, which has to do with what's happening today. Like, if this was the case, Chris Lee couldn't be with us today, at least like live. But at the same time, like a bit ironically and provocatively, I focused on this kind of aspect, this kind of separate aspect of the like the fast internet. So, for example, that kind of moment in which you kick your partner out of your bedroom, like the sleepy partner, because you have to enter into a meeting. Or like when you are making sure that your cat is not destroying anything while you are sort of pretending to pay attention to the meeting. And of course, when it comes to school, this kind of provocation had to do also on the ability not to have to replicate, like the school atmosphere. In kitchen where like breakfast is prepared, or dark little rooms. So because like to a certain extent, school is not just like the place, the logistics of learning. It's also the place that offers a certain degree of neutrality. It's a bit like the school uniform, in the sense that it's sort of meant, successfully or less, to not to make distinctions between like the rich kid and the poor kid. So it had like a democratic value, the school as a building. So when it comes to remote work, of course, at the very beginning of the pandemic, it was introduced a bit as a sort of necessary remedy. But later, as you all know, like the focus became economical. Working from home meant both having to save time, like saving time of the commute, but also at the same time, like save money. And perhaps more for the companies that were like having the employees at home. But now, to a certain extent, the tide has changed again. So we see a lot of tech companies, Elon Musk, suggesting that it's time to go back to the office. And I would say that one of the reasons is like, let's say, officially productivity, but maybe it has to do more with a certain degree of managerial insecurity, or like loss of sense of control. But there was like an aspect of like remote work that wasn't too much taken into account, and was like the angle, the potential angle of autonomy, like the ability to organize your time, to structure your time, to structure your commitment, to take the opportunity to rethink them. But in order to focus on that, one has to admit that somehow remote work doesn't only guarantee like this kind of presence, this kind of proximity, to stay with the topic of the festival, but also it makes claims. It produces expectation of availability and presence. So to see a bit of this, of like these claims made by the new technology, this new technological environment, I was very much fond of this manifesto, this anti-chat manifesto written by Michelle Kashprach, in which, like, you see, she says, like, down with the tyranny of the lipstick and the airbrush. We refuse to fake living in an IKEA showroom with recently coiffed hair. And I think she was pretty prescient in the sense that this is post, let's say, the peak of pandemic. You have like people sort of faking to have like a nice house in order to get more, matches on. Nice, now it's there. No, it's gone away my slides, but probably now it appears there. At the same time, also Donatella Della Ratta was like thinking about this possibility, of course, she was pointing out something quite obvious, that not everybody has the luxury of living in a beautiful, spacious apartment. A lot of people, for example, in Italy, live with mom and dad. The kind of context of, now it's on, by the way, you can keep it like this, like the situation of the camera off, that many teachers complained about, not necessarily had to do with laziness on the part of the students, of lack of commitment, but also had to do with an autonomy in the sense of like not showing like the personal space that you don't want to disclose to a certain extent. And this is like somehow the memes that Donatella Della Ratta included in her essay on Zoom that sort of manifest that very well. Like, please don't tell anyone how I live, with the facade falling down. Gert Loving, which might be here also today, also analyzed this, like the Zoom fatigue in a long, beautiful choral essay, in which what I liked the most was like this kind of architectural metaphor. So like the square of Zoom, in the perspective of Gert Loving, were a bit like like Le Corbusier modernist housing nightmare, in which everything seems rational until it's not, and it becomes more like Jacques Tati or things like this. But like this kind of reflection on smart working, telepresence began way earlier. And I found this obscure Italian book by Oscar Marchesio. The Italian will notice that the subtitle is very cringy, but I can't translate it. It has to do with a song. Marchesio in 1996 was putting it like this. Yes, because now you get the computer for free from IBM, at the time, as long as you put it in your wife's place. The wife out on the balcony, the computer in bed. It pays off twice, win-win. I decided to keep the sexist joke for two reasons. One has to do with the fact that imagining like this picturing this image of like the computer in bed is something quite profound coming from 1996, like with the laptop. And the idea of the wife on the balcony is something that will come back later in this talk. So yeah, that's why that is there. But of course, like remote work, in the way we came to understand it, not only mediated work, but also created new micro tasks. You know them all, like customizable background, sharing slides, creating breaking rooms, transcript to review, videos to upload to YouTube, the Trello, how is it called, the Trello? The thing for the appointment where you organize like when you do the meeting. So the point that I wanted to make was that remote work, telepresence, telework is not just work that is transmitted, but it's also work that is multiplied. And at the time, I was doing works in that direction. For example, for a group called Argos, I made like a full calendar of the day of like these little tasks that are not accounted in like your as work basically. And the one that is closest to us is like the last one, how I close the day, like waiting for Godot, meaning like the Zoom call person that doesn't show up, and we are all guilty. Also Chris, by the way, so we can talk about that. So this is to say that even passivity, even waiting, can become a form of work, or labor, or time invested in work. There is also a further analogy, which I thought interesting. I don't know if it's like very strict, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think it's kind of convincing. Historian Ruth Cowan argued that the dissemination of household technologies in the house was, to a certain extent, ironic because they were like microwaves and washing machine, etc., were meant to, save work, save time, like free time for mothers, for women. But in the end, this is not really what happened, because while, of course, the time was liberated by these technologies, the standards of cleanliness, of hygiene in the house raised at the same time. So we can argue that maybe the work is the same or even more. And this connects us a bit to the topic of the house, in which the work has to do with attaining a standard of a good domestic life that becomes increasingly more difficult in large and medium-sized cities. An example, Alvar Altissimo, this anonymous author, published this book of fictional housing plans in Milan, in which the idea was to capture the crazy housing situation, to put them to extremes. So for example, you have this housing plan of a couple that, of course, they go living together to save money on the rent. But then when they break up, they adopt an architectural solution and they put some sort of séparé in the middle, which is very beautiful and very real, I would argue. At this point, you might ask, you might wonder, you might say, but remote communication isn't supposed to take people to allow remote work, and therefore not for every employee or worker to be in the city. So to free the cities, and therefore to free space. Well, apparently, this was somehow the promise of older remote technologies. For example, Thomas Maldonado, already with the internet, was speaking about this, but in a negative way anyway. He was saying, okay, sure, people will be moved away to the city, especially office worker, but this would cause a sort of desocialization of men. But however, it turns out that this kind of disurbanization thesis is false. And there are studies that analyzed the correlation between information technology of remoteness, for example, the telephone, and cities. And apparently there is a positive correlation. So more phone, more people in the city. So yeah. This is also a comment on the so-called South working, on the idea of moving to the periphery, which was big throughout the pandemic. So this leads us a bit to this notion of Existenzminimum. So it's important to say that this idea of Existenzminimum was a positive, constructive project of the best architects of Europe, the most prominent, in order to come together internationally and define, in a context of scarcity of resources, what are the minimal conditions for a dignitous life, or a good life. This is how Sarah Brish put it, a dignified and healthy existence. This was the promise of Existenzminimum, assured by a defined minimum level of income. But somehow, this turns out to be kind of nightmare, because we should make a distinction between minimalism as a sort of aesthetic and what we really got, which was a form of minimism. So this is minimalism. This is the typical image of minimalism. This is a Kanye West loft in New York by Claudio Silvestrin. So you see what it is. It's a lot of empty space with a few furniture items that are very oratic, sacred, almost holy, theophanics, you might say. But of course, you all know that the minimalism that is not this kind of large, empty, and immaculate areas, but really turned out to be a mere reduction of square meters. So it's betrayed minimalism, is minimism. And Marie Kondo herself, like sort of the poster child of somehow this movement, also changed her mind with the idea of like, trashing all the objects that don't spark joy. Probably because trashing also means outsourcing them to a storage space that not everybody has. And this kind of situation of the home as a sort of space of conflict, I think really connects well to this work by Sebastian Schmig, who is a Berlin artist, who developed like this format quite before the actual, like the peak of the pandemic, like the pandemic itself as a, like close down of the houses. The idea was simple. To deliver an exhibition as you would deliver like food to your house. So to have like the beautiful thing was also that the courier would install the exhibition in your place, so intervene in your private space. So this is like the kind of white cube brought to your place with all the artwork, and so I curated the exhibition in Milan, the edition of this format in Milan, and this was like one of my favorite pieces. So you would assemble a kind of Molotov. It was by Enrico Boccioletti, and the piece is called "When There Is Nothing Else to Burn Down, You Should Burn Out Yourself," something like this. Going back to this idea of like minimalism, there is a nice book dedicated to the minimalist aesthetic in the US by Kyle Chayka, who is a great journalist. It's called The Longing for Less. But you see, even in his book, there is like this kind of dark side of minimalism, like the minimism that reappears. And where does it appear? It appears in dreams. So I don't know how many New Yorkers are here, but like this is the story that Kyle Chayka says, that every New Yorker at one point or another has this dream. So in this dream, it's a bit like being John Malkovich. You have like a little door in your house, everything is normal, but a door that you've never seen. And you open this door and you have like a new big giant room, like the Kanye West loft in your house, and you are very happy, I suppose. The ironies of like this minimalism and minimism within, let's say, the history of architecture, the functionalism, are also in places like this. This is a real estate agency in Milan, where like, the square meters are very, very scarce, and it's called less is more. The functionalist, well, in a way, yes. So also makes me think of the kind of new practices that are developed. Like, for example, I have this friend in Berlin, and what they post on Instagram is just like sublet announcement. It's all like this. Well, I think we all know people like this, or we all are people like this, no? Because we have to. So the tragedy here is that from the promise of the creative city, of the creative industries, what we have is like sort of the art of subletting, no? That's like the actual artistic practice that we are all. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I mean, it's not just, how to put it, like a joke, but there is like kind of experiences of this sublet art put in practice. One of my favorite examples is by Brett Romali. In 2018, he put this kit on sale on Etsy to live outside of your apartment in Brooklyn or whatever, in Lower East Side. So you could sleep in the tent and put your place in Airbnb, like the wife of Oscar Marchisio. Since this kind of room, like the room of Kyle Chayka, is only in our dreams, like where do we try to attain this kind of ideal of order and the good Airbnb life? Well, it's in the background of our calls. Like the key role is played by the webcam, which it's interesting because it makes like remote work, a matter of like really of focal length. And to a certain extent, it's one of the first time that the living space entered the digital space. No, it becomes like a presence. Well, we are all used to this, we all know this image. But here is my very scientific infographic of this. So it's really a matter of what the camera can see that defines what's life and what work. And I was very, very inspired by this, this image of the optical threshold of work and life. 1 minute. Well, I'm going to take it a bit longer. No, because, yeah. I think I don't have much. But anyway, yeah. So, so this kind of digitization of remote work goes hand in hand with a digital maximization, which I already sort of described by the amount of work. And the definition which I like to provide of this kind of digital maximalism is all media all at once. A nice example, a recent example, is Apple Vision Pro. No, you know, the augmented reality visor, in which you have one app that shows you the very old cathodic TV, all media all at once. So what is the aesthetic of the digital maximalist? You add all the new features, channels, formats, and tools like vegetables in a soup. So what are some examples of this digital maximalism? The metaverse, you might have seen, the Apple Vision Pro in a way, but also the social media platform chasing one another, adding various functions. Now it's also called platform decay and shitification. No? And finally, also things that you find in AI like text-to-image tools like Midjourney, for example, where a lot of parameters has to do with this, with high resolution, hyper-realistic, 8K, etc. So I thought to make a little experiment of myself and to provide this kind of the professional image I project to the people I have meeting of, which is also with the expression, it's the real thing. So I didn't want to fake it, I didn't smile, and to try to expand a bit with AI, the context, to see a bit what kind of imagination would emerge of my working space. So I got, this kind of John Ruffman-ish image, but also the kind of idealista post. And finally, my favorite, Plato's cave office. I think the best definition of this work was by Stefan Sagmeister, who spoke of your workplace on drugs. And what I like a lot of these images is that, to a certain extent, of course, they are false, no? But they tell a larger truth of my past life and the life of many of people surrounding me. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I have now, the Kanye West loft, but it's not that messy. And I also did some variation of this workshop with other people as well here at Transmediale, so I want to thank the people who participated. And so you can see that people made friends in this imaginative synthetic space. So, with the digital maximalism, the sad part is that don't necessarily you get a more adventurous experience of the digital world. Think of infinite scroll or automatic playlist. A solution, a place to look for, at least for Donatella Della Ratta, is the sound dimension. She says that it's there in this kind of warm but limited dimension, in this kind of small media you can find through proximity, through closeness. So, as she puts it, connectivity does not always equal connection. Gert Loving, always going hard, going strong, says we should ban the use of video conferences in work. Of course, big statement. But what I like of this take is that it also emphasizes the access to buildings as a form of human rights. Which is somehow the basis of many movements for the right to the city in most cities in Europe, like Lisbon, Barcelona, probably Berlin. And what we should sabotage, according to Gert Loving, is the real estate mode of thinking. Another example is Varia in Rotterdam. They are thinking of minimum viable learning, playing on the idea of MVP, minimum viable product. I'm going to conclude with my kind of example of the aesthetic take on this kind of maximalism, minimalism. And I will do it in art, in the field of art. So to me, the minimalism, real minimalist, fake, real maximalist, fake minimalist example of an artwork that goes in this direction is Marina Abramovic, The Artist is Present. You know, on paper is a very minimalist kind of performance. You know, you have a table, a person, a red dress, and 2 chairs. And they look each other. But again, it's a bit like in the loft, it's a bit like in Marie Kondo. Like all the real work is sort of outsourced to the surrounding. No, you have like, if you see the MoMA thing, it has like big lights, a big crew, a lot of people like looking at the performance happening. No, so in order to have that clean space, you have to have like a messy space all around. Like the minimalist version, is like an homage made to the Marina Abramovic Artist is Present, which is called The Artist is Typing by Guido Segni. Well, it's sort of self-explanatory. So you basically, from a website, you could see at any point when the artist was typing. And I'm sure that all of you know, have like sentiments of how to put it, pain, expectation, urgency, sadness attached to this little, animated GIF of like the 3 points. So this is like a nice manifestation of what it means, you know, to feel something when it's also very low resolution, like a bunch of pixels. Thank you so much. Can I sit down too? Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Chris.
Okay. Hi. Sorry I can't be there. Sorry to make you wait.
You proved my point.
Yeah, I thought it worked out nicely. That was incredible as expected. Sorry, actually, I'm gonna mute myself. I'm catching my echo. This is maybe another one of these multiplications you're talking about. Oh, thank you. Um, there's so much to say. We don't have a lot of time, so I'll just start with my a couple of comments. The first is I have a suggestion for you. I think, well, as we're both graphic designers, the new coinage of minimism, I think needs to be miniaturized a little bit more. Just get rid of the vowels, and you'll be you'll have something that you can sell perhaps. But just as a generality, as a sort of general comment, and I think with a lot of your work, what you do is you articulate and give form to something that is felt by a lot of people, I think. And in this case, it's the primary sort of feeling I read in your thinking is resentment. And another thing that this does is it also, in this particular case, puts into relief, I think, you know, through the concepts that you generate, an awareness of a condition, namely a labor subjectivity that I think is not so much defined by where, like the factory or the office even, but by a kind of relationship, a spatial relationship, a remoteness. So the remoteness is the sort of like primary condition that makes coherent a potentially new. Maybe you've thought about this before in your sort of work with the Institute for Network Cultures, but I think to maybe a lot of people, including me, a new labor subjectivity that sort of begs questions of what power does labor have from this position? Just to sort of like conclude this comment and maybe get your response to it, I'm reminded of a book by a landscape architect named Jesse Le Cavalier. He writes a book about Walmart, basically called The Rule of Logistics. And in it, he quotes I think a US Army general who talks about war as not a phenomenon that's primarily determined by battlefield achievements, combat, but more by logistics, more by being at the right place at the right time, moving equipment and goods and ammunition and people to the right place at the right time. And this feels like what you were describing, especially with your work with the calendar, right? This to me suggests maybe that what this condition is the condition of war, right? Being at the right place at the right time. I don't know if that's a useful place to start, but I'll put that out there for now.
Wow, Chris, fantastic as usual. Like a lot of inputs. I always appreciate of you. I mean, we know each other for a long time now, so I always appreciate the attempt to to highlight the strategies in someone work. And so you emphasize this idea of like resentment. To me, it's an interesting question because the sentimental aspect of the work, I believe, in a research, in an artwork, should somehow emerge by like a sort of, like tone deaf, almost, data-based approach, in which I think that maybe you have like a chance to also, to interpret the feeling that you want to have with the fact, with the theory, with the hypothesis. So it's like by contrast that you can have like different, you can charge this theory, these ideas with very different feelings. Also depending exactly from what you were saying, like the let's say the labor subjectivity that you are within a specific time of your life or your path of your career now, because like one of the things that is fascinating is that like the kind of labor subjectivity, the career thing, is not like progress. It's not necessarily like this. We change houses, we change countries, we go to a beautiful house, to a like crammed room, we break up with our partner, no? So there are like, all these kind of things involved in different kind of stages of life that can come back to haunt us, no? That transform our life. So the attempt is to leave that open, but not only to the people who listen to me today, but also to myself, not to charge it with a different sentiment at all times. So I really appreciate that point. The other thing you say, like this kind of idea of like being there on time, is a bit like warlike. And I think that there is, of course, there is like something that I can take from it, which, like much of the implementation of the tools that we use it doesn't seem really directed by the workforce, let's say, at least at schools, but it's really a managerial, hierarchical structuring, disciplining of the workforce or the activities. For example, in several places where I worked and I still work, like Teams, which it's like behemoth of a platform, was implemented from one day to another and really changed relationship, changed the expectation of presence, because it also incorporated like a chat function, that at all times. So, and this thing went so fast, this kind of managerial turn that invests like work as a whole, it's really embedded in the tools. So the tools are both the managerial manifestation of these things, but also a metaphor of the managerialization, the bureaucratization topic that is dear to you of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think I also wanted to get into the stuff about teaching that you were talking about. But yeah, let's stick with work for a second. I think this a kind of like near 24/7 availability, or this kind of created expectation of this availability is obviously heinous and despicable. But as designers, I think the kind of interesting question is, in the sort of like normative practices, like how do you make that pleasant? How do you make that friendly? How do you make that palatable? And the last artwork you showed is sort of like the kind of perfect example of that, sort of friendly, bouncy dots, but as you mentioned, could be loaded with so much emotion and anticipation and anxiety. Um, but I don't know if this is a kind of clean segue, but the other thing that I think the work from home does now, after we're sort of out of the pandemic lockdown for a couple of years, and this kind of call back to the office does it. I feel like it's even actually not so much about sort of managerial oversight or like accountability, because the tools of remote work enable that so much better, I think. It produces so much documentation that gives the HR departments in every company excuses to let you go, right? But I think what work from home, the callback to the office now is even more banal. I think it's like a tripwire, right? To say, okay, if you don't want to come back, we were going to fire you anyway, but we didn't have an excuse before, right? Uh, so I feel like it's even more banal there. But there's so many facets to this. It's yeah, maybe you can jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very, very smart interpretation of what's happening. It's like, Occam razor. You are looking really at the most obvious take, which honestly I didn't think about. Maybe a little comment on this idea of like the making like the interface more palatable, more like pleasurable. I think the best example of this in the last year has been like dark mode in software, in the sense that, there is an article by Ian Bogost that says like, we all have dark mode because programmers needed dark mode. But so so you can stay at night without tiring your eyes and so on and so forth. But there is also interesting development. So now, for example, on Instagram, you have like the little moon showing that you are not available. This is also something that would have been unthinkable, let's say 10 years ago. So we see that the kind of demands, the kind of claims from the user base are becoming functional. And this is wonderful to a certain extent. Now, but bringing it back, let's say, to this kind of discussion on the city somehow, on the dwelling dimension, while we have seen like time entering abruptly in the interface through dark mode, through the moon, etc., the space is not yet there. No, it's still like background. No, so I'm very fascinated, and I think like I want to see more artists, collectives, movement, like reflecting on this. Like, how does the reality of the city or like of the house, of the small apartment, enters like the interface? So this is like the idea that I'm toying with somehow.
Yeah, actually, that's something that I wanted to share with you too, as a maybe reference point here, was that when during the lockdown, when we were teaching online, I teach at a very expensive private school in Brooklyn, New York, called the Pratt Institute, graphic design. And so when we went online, I realized that not all of my students are wealthy, because that's the assumption that I'd made. It's an expensive school. And the way that I realized this was primarily through the phenomenon, right, of people not keeping their cameras on. But for the few that did, you would see they're at their parents' summer home, and there's very tasteful grown-up furniture in the background. And then with other students, the students who had their cameras off, one could sort of maybe infer that there was a different kind of spatial situation because of the quality of the sound. You could hear a certain kind of smallness of the room, or you could hear siblings in the background in TV, and they don't have a desk, so they're sitting on the laptop in the dinner table. Uh, these things also sort of became, I think, legible as sort of like indicators of kind of a class status outside of, the kind of work kind of thing. But yeah, I just wanted to share that as a point of reference, and maybe you have a response.
fantastic, this kind of reflect. It's I mean, to put it in let's say designer terms, it's like the background that becomes foreground. No, for us, and for most people, it was like some kind of like there were a lot of memes, like students joining from the car, from the scooter. And there was a chance, and there is still a chance, like to go beyond the laughter, the joke, and to empathize. No, exactly with the theme of this festival, not to exercise a degree of empathy, proximity, closeness to those moments. And I think it's really an open possibility, and probably there is a lot of things that have happened in this sense in terms of studies, etc. And I don't know them. But yeah, I think that there is a lot of, like a lot of work that can be done in this optical sense within the camera view, the camera gaze, and to a certain extent without. So yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think we had some intention to open it up to questions from the audience. I don't know if there's somebody in the audience with a microphone.
Anything? Anyone wants to ask a question? Yeah, I see it back there. It's not a hand. Yeah, it's a hand. It was like, it's over there. No, there is more? There is more. Yeah.
Is it
Sorry.
dark mode over there?
Very dark mode, because I have the light here. It's like...
Okay, I'm on. I just wanted to zoom in on this idea of resentment, and maybe as a little bit of an intervention to all of Transmediale's zoomed-in lens, is that it shouldn't be about resentment, it should be about outrage and something that we refuse to be obedient to. And I think there needs to be more sort of looking at the resistances to these things that have caused us to be so contained by the technological invasions of our lives and life habitat space. And it's making me think, if you look at that from a macro perspective, we're all in our sort of cozy cubicles in the global north, being forced to watch outside of our own frame, the open air prison where anyone who tries to rebel is getting slaughtered in our screens 24/7 on our computers, and we need to resist that by any means necessary. It's not enough what Transmediale here is presenting to us.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's this seems like a comment more to Transmediale. So I think maybe there will be a chance to respond to this specific point in the last conversation. Which what I can say is that, again, like my take is like non-normative in terms of like the sentiment that a certain work engender. So if like someone insists on the rage that the divide between like global north and other places of the world, yes, let's do it.
Yeah, I guess in the opposite direction of that, I was interested in the way that when you're talking about the old idea of existence minimum in housing, the idea was that people would somehow own or have their own little minimal a functional spot where they could reproduce themselves and then go work. But one of the weirdnesses of doing architecture, but now all design now, is that we're all renters, and that our actual work is to pay rent. And where we get the rent money is, it's just like ambiguous and kind of like, and so this, this whole thing of being like online, being enraged at the latest ever-escalating atrocities, like spectacle. I mean, that's our job, is to be there and engage, and even when you teach, it's like you are, you're kind of operating in this role of like a minister who kind of like hands out this catechism of hyper engaged, enraged like spectatorship, and it's all over. Like you pay for, like you pay rent for Zoom, you pay rent for the apartment that you Zoom from, you pay rent for the Adobe suite that you use to make the work that you teach the kids who are paying rent, like to be in their expensive schools, and of course the people who are, or the thing that, and so there's this inversion of work and production and reproduction in there, and so I'm wondering how this goes with it. Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, there is. Thank you also for this point, because I didn't emphasize at all, actually, the difference, let's say, between like rent and property. And you're very right that these are like two different words. The only thing that I want to stress here is that, for example, in the work by Sebastian Schmid, in this idea of like not being at home, there is like traces of this feeling like you are in your own hostel. No, so it's very true to a certain extent, because like what is the IKEA furniture if not some sort of like temporary kind of Airbnb for yourself that you structure for yourself for a temporary amount of time. But maybe like the melancholic trajectory of my talk is this, that Existenzminimum, yes, was like producing like the subjectivity of the factory worker, no, and elevating it to better the condition. So we went from like something to a certain extent bad as well, in terms of like, to create the social factory, the so-called social factory, to something even worse, in terms that even that like little cubicle is not yours, and it's temporary, and it's like IKEA, and you maybe like will go out to take a selfie to get laid, basically. So thank you. Chris, they are telling me to close. I don't know if you want to say a few words to wrap it up.
I just want to say thank you, and I wish I was there to listen in person, the debates and discussions, and thank you and congratulations.
Really a pleasure, and thank you all.